way is the right way, I might say. Nobody doing it better, y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles, got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the TWSN.
Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of the Sit Down with Malik Wright recap show. As we recap the Bengals' victory over the Tennessee Titans, I'm your host, Malik Wright. Joined by my co-host, as always, Daniel Alameda on the ones and twos. We are live from beautiful Florida. We were able to watch the game together. We were able to have a good time watching the game, too. Bengals found a way to pull out the victory. The defense pulled out 7 turnovers today, and which was a great performance, I would say, from Luan Arumo and company. I believe he deserves his flowers. I believe we're going to get into all that. Daniel, I want to get your initial thoughts on the game.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts of the Bengals offense? What were your thoughts on Luan Arumo today? What was your thoughts on the defense of the Bengals? Bengals move to now 6 wins on the season, still somehow alive in the playoff picture, especially with the Dolphins' loss today. What were your thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, so overall, first off, this is the story of the Bengals. They can't play a boring game. That's one of my first takeaways. Every single game this season has been exciting in some way, and that's when you just look at every single game and what's been the deciding factor between them winning and losing. It really is crunch time. And when you look at the end of the game too, they were still in a close game. Obviously, they pulled away at the end, but it was still came down to a 1-score game. But when we talk about the defense, I think that this defense, it is very clear what the issue with this defense was all season long. They have talented players at certain positions, right? Obviously, Trey Hendrickson, you look at Mike Hilton is a perfect example of a guy who's good in spurts, and he's one of the guys I want to shout out. First off, he is the highest graded PFF run defender when it comes to the secondary in the entire NFL. So I use Mike Hilton as a perfect example because in this game, he made amazing plays, right? Coming off the edge multiple times to get great run stops. But he has a specific role. And I think that that's the difference between this Bengals defense versus other teams. You look at the Tennessee Titans, right? Jeffrey Simmons made multiple huge splash plays, and people all over social media on Bengals, Twitter saying the same exact thing. We need a Jeffrey Simmons. And I agree with you. And I think that there's a huge talent gap when it comes to the Bengals defense versus other teams, right? And I think that that's, it's a main factor when you look at what's the issue on this Bengals defense. Once again, the Mike Hilton example, you go look at many different games. Go look at that Steelers game. Go look at the Cowboys game, the 1-on-1 with CeeDee Lamb. Go look at the AFC Championship 2 years ago. Mike Hilton in coverage, man-to-man coverage. That's not his strong suit, but he is a guy who can play in specific roles. But the Bengals defense of 2024 needs him to play a starting slot role. They need him to play man-to-man coverage, against some of these star receivers, and that's just never going to work out. So when you see a defense that comes away with, I believe, 7 total turnovers today, that's not a fluke, right? That's not something that's saying, hey, that defense is a terrible defense. This defense has something there, and that's why I think that the whole conversation of firing Luan Arumo, of getting rid of him and keeping Zach Taylor, I think that that's out of the question now, right? Especially the fact that you look at this performance that he had and the defense had. I struggle to see how we're having that conversation in 3 weeks. Hey, the one change we need to make is firing Luan Arumo. That's not the takeaway from this. The takeaway from this really is you've got some talented players on defense, but you need to have an influx of talent, right? We discussed this. The top 5 players on your team, 4 out of the 5, quote unquote cornerstones, are guys on the offense side of the ball. Orlando Brown, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. The one guy on the defense side of the ball that you have that's a cornerstone is Trey Hendrickson. So when you look at the rest of the guys, Miles Murphy, Malik, right? He came on at the end of the game multiple times and he didn't really pop, right? The same thing, Dax Hill, he obviously got injured, but these guys that you've invested into high in the first round, high in the second round, high in the third round, they just haven't been producing. So I think that this offseason, once again, you got 3 more games, but how this season has played out, where we were 2 weeks ago, where it was fire everybody, get rid of Zach Taylor, Luan Arumo, you need a clean house. There's a real possibility to where you leave this season running it right back with Zach Taylor. Leave this season running it right back with Lou Anarumo. And that's the conversation we need to have now, right? Is, okay, what are your two options? Your one option is, okay, if you want to, get rid of Lou Anarumo, you want to get rid of Zach Taylor, then who are you going to bring in? And I think that that's just a terrible way to look at it. So for me, this team, albeit they're 6-8, they have remnants of a team that I seriously think can make a deep playoff push. And when you look at a team that you think that can make a deep playoff push, how do you change that for next season? The biggest domino that is going to fall is T. Higgins, right? And T. Higgins had a very, very good game. And I think he showed why today. It's extremely important that you keep a T. Higgins, you keep a Jamar Chase, and you find ways to develop talent on the defense side of the ball. And you go spend that first round capital on a defensive lineman like a Kenneth Grant from Michigan, right? 6'3", 340 pounds. You saw what Tavondre Sweat did today at certain points, right? He made himself very, very, aware for the Bengals offense. Hey, he was a huge force in the run game. He was a huge force in the pass game a couple times. So I think that that's where we are with this Bengals defense. A guy like Geno Stone, for example, had a great game today. He's fine. He's fine. This game and the past two games doesn't make me believe that, okay, this defense is perfectly fine when it comes to talent. No, we saw Jordan Battle make a couple boneheaded decisions, right? The dropped, play that should have resulted in a touchdown. He missed a couple huge run fits that allowed Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard to run for 20+ yards. So I still think that it is a serious talent deficiency when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, that this one game, albeit, like I said, Geno Stone had a great game. This one game didn't show me that the talent on defense is right up to par. No, I think that this showed me that Lou Anarumo and this defensive scheme has something there, but you still need a bunch, a huge talent infusion when it comes to this Bengals defense. So,
Danny, you just cooked.
I appreciate
that. I appreciate that, right? It allows me to kind of sit back and just take in everything you were saying there. We're going to get more into, obviously, the Lou Anarumo, the Bengals defense discussion. But while you're here, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Listen, I was very impressed with this game for the Bengals, only because it had everything you could have imagined in it. It had everything. I mean, you talk about overcoming setbacks. You talk about the special teams making plays, the offense making plays, the defense making plays. I think what we're seeing right before us is that this team is capable. This team is capable. I do believe in the sentiment that you shared, Daniel, that there is a talent gap on the defensive side of the ball. And I think today was just a masterclass of Lou putting a lot of guys in positions to succeed. But I also think this defense is playing with confidence, especially after the game they had against the Dallas Cowboys. But you know what was interesting to me, Daniel? At the end of the game, the interaction Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor had on the sideline. If you can, roll the clip. I am no lip reader, but it seemed like he dropped a couple of F-bombs, said it was embarrassing, and something was bullshit to some degree. I don't know what he was referencing there. Maybe the overall offensive performance today, because this is a game where you could say the defense sort of carried in a lot of ways. But I thought the interaction was very interesting, Daniel. I saw people on Twitter right now, they're kind of having the discussion, right? And they're asking, is Zach Taylor's message waning thin with Joe Burrow? What were your thoughts, Daniel, on that interaction?
Yeah, I had mixed feelings about that. Initial gut told me that it was almost like Joe Burrow venting to Zach Taylor about either his problem or the offensive line's penalties when it came to multiple false starts from Grandy, multiple false starts from the wide receivers. That was my initial thought, right? And I think that still could be a possibility to where it's, hey, it's and this is how I thought the conversation would go. Like Zach Taylor walks up to Joe Burrow and Joe Burrow's like, fucking embarrassing. This is embarrassing. And I think he's got it right. And there's been times where even Joe, right, slamming the tablet down saying, hey, he was mad at himself. And that was my initial reaction. It seems like, Joe Burrow was venting to a Zach Taylor about the penalties, about maybe it was the Jordan Battle dropped, fumble that should have resulted in a touchdown. Maybe it was them not scoring a touchdown there. That was my initial, reaction. But then when it came to a little bit more in depth, I think that there is a possibility where Joe Burrow was, it could have been mad at Zach Taylor. Hey, we should have been calling pass plays there. Maybe there was a conversation between them where, once again, Joe Burrow always wants to go for the touchdown. That's a quarterback's mantra. You look at any quarterback, whether it was Anthony Richardson multiple times, Lamar Jackson, John Harbaugh are almost like this when it comes to fourth down plays. I think that there was a possibility that Joe Burrow was mad at Zach Taylor. My overall sentiment, though, to be honest with you, I think that it was probably just Joe Burrow venting about the whole offense's performance. And I do think that there is some, understanding between a Jamar Chase and a Joe Burrow to where he said, hey, like, we believe we're doing everything out there. And maybe there's a sentiment that they believe Zach Taylor's not doing enough, right? You saw the stat that came up on the TV today. The offense's production the past 3 years with a healthy Joe Burrow, 27 points a game, 27 points a game, 27 points a game, 350 yards a game, 350 yards a game, 350 yards a game. There is a possibility where Joe and Jamar believe it's all on them, and it's not really all what Zach Taylor's doing. So I think that when you look at that interaction, I think it could be taken either way. I'm very confident, though, in saying Joe Burrow is coming to his own when it comes to leadership, when it comes to speaking out. And it wouldn't shock me if Joe Burrow has a feeling of he's doing it all. He's Superman, and the offense isn't doing enough around him. Like I said, the penalties, I think if I had to make a guess, and I'm a betting man, if I had to bet, I think it's on the overall penalties and the interceptions that Joe Burrow had, because there were quite a few plays that Joe Burrow, kind of took a few shots, and you could say that those plays were on him. So I think it was on the overall offense's performance, because like you said, the defense carried today, and that should be the sentiment. That should be the narrative that, hey, the defense is the reason why the Bengals won this game. Yes, they let up a touchdown at the end of the game, but the reason why you were up 2 scores multiple times is because of the defense. And I think that that's the sentiment that Bengals fans should take away from this game, saying, hey, all the conversation we were having before, the conversation that the national heads were talking about before that Cowboys game, that, oh, it's the Bengals defense is terrible. If Joe Burrow had a better defense, let's cut that out, right? Let's use our actual football analysis to understand, hey, this is not just cut and dry. You cannot just look at the stats and understand, hey, the Bengals defense is the main problem. Let's dive a little bit deep into that. And that's why I think we're doing the show, to dive into it, saying, hey, albeit this is a 1-game sample size, this shows that the Bengals defense has something to work with, and Lou Anarumo has something to work with for the foreseeable future with the Bengals.
Listen, man, y'all cooking me in the comment section. People saying I look like I'm in witness protection program. People say I look like an unlockable character. People said they couldn't see my identity. I got jokes, man. But I want to make sure my message is consistent. The same stuff I said a couple weeks ago. This is evaluation mode for the entire coaching staff. This is evaluation mode for a Zach Taylor. This is evaluation mode for a Lou Anarumo. This evaluation mode for the front office. This is where you have to look at yourself, and you can't judge it based off of one game. It's about the consistency. For me, what I'd be looking for if I was a part of the front office, do the players still play hard for their coach? Do they still want to be a part of this, right? Are they still engaged? Are they still laying it all on the line? It is Zach Taylor's message, is Lou Anarumo's message still ringing clear to that locker room? And I'll keep saying what I've been saying. If the answer to that is no, then you have to make a change. For me, even if the Bengals were to go on a winning streak and win every single game the rest of the way, that brings up a bigger question to me. What led us to this point? Why are we at this point? If we are capable, if we have the talent, if we have the players in place to make something happen, why are we sitting with 8 losses in December on our record? Why are we fighting for our playoff lives, albeit extremely small? Why are we fighting for that? If you're getting blown out, you can look at it easily and say, hey, we have a talent problem. We have a player problem. But if you're losing 1-score games, that's on coaching. And I think that's what it always is going to come down to. It's what it's always going to come down to. So for me, while it felt good to win because winning feels good, if I was in the front office, if I was the decision maker, which I'm not, I have no pull at all, I would seriously consider still a change. But you have to ask yourself who out there would provide obvious upgrades and what we're looking for, right? Because what you're looking for essentially is consistency amongst this Bengals football team. They have been able to keep this crop together for several years now, and you're still looking for consistency. The only pieces that have really changed are on the defense side of the ball. You're still looking for consistency. You're still vying for consistency. And Andrew Torres, I don't think Daniel's giving Zach Taylor cover at all. I don't believe that. I just think he is looking at it from the Bengals' perspective, which albeit is realistic how they move. They do look at it from that perspective. They have to, because it's the way they operate. They are judging this game and they're seeing how this team operates, and they're saying, you know what? Well, our players are still engaged. Our fans are still engaged. Maybe we don't need to make changes. And as a boat goes by, I look at it, man, and I just say there's going to be some interesting conversations that need to be had. Nothing changes the outcome for me. I'm not blinded by it. I'm just simply showing people and telling people it's not just Lou's terrible. Let's replace Lou. And that was the narrative that was going on for the last couple of weeks. So I don't know, man. Daniel, what were some of your bright spots of the game? Let's get to some of those.
Yeah, for sure. And just to kind of close that out real quick too, I think that like my whole sentiment when it comes to this, we have to see what is realistic. This was the situation that everybody was hoping that the Bengals wouldn't be in, right? I think that there is a realistic possibility with 3 games left that the Bengals win out. And from a Bengals standpoint, ask yourself this question: are the Bengals really going to move on? And this is the conversation of would versus should. Would they really move on from a head coach if he won 4 straight games heading into the offseason? And that's, for me, I keep bringing back to 5 straight games. I don't know if they will. And we got to see how they perform the next couple of games. But that's what I look at. I don't think that they will. But it depends. You got to see, you got a Steelers game, you got a Browns game, you got a Broncos game, 3 very, very, very good teams. But when we look at this game in general, there were a lot of bright spots. Like I said, I looked at Mike Hilton as a huge bright spot. He was a huge impact player, not necessarily on the interception, but he is a great role player. And that's for me when I look at how do you approach this Bengals secondary when it comes to this offseason. I would hope that Dax Hill comes back healthy. Obviously, a torn ACL for a cornerback is brutal, but I would like to see Dax Hill be the starting slot cornerback, and you just, keep Mike Hilton there, and you keep him in for situational purposes because he is PFF's highest graded run defender when it comes to cornerbacks. And I think that he's absurd when it comes to a specific role as a blitzer. And this game showed me it all, right? But I don't want him in there man-to-man coverage. So I thought he was a serious bright spot, as well as obviously I really like Dan Pitcher once again moving Jamar Chase around a lot. I think that having him in motion, putting him everywhere, putting him in the backfield, it just creates something for the defense that we haven't seen in prior years when it comes to the Bengals. And that's something we were pleading with. And I just don't want to gloss over that because I think that that helps out so much for not only Joe Burrow, but for the offensive line, for the secondary, for guys like T. Higgins. It just opens up so much. So Dan Pitcher continuously, shining and using Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase all over the place.
How about the performance from Geno Stone?
Yeah.
Down the stretch here, he's getting more acclimated to this Bengals defense. He's getting more comfortable. What were your thoughts on Geno Stone? And by the way, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live. Also, drop your comments in the section. We'll get to your comments. We'll get to your questions here in a second. Daniel?
Yeah, and we'll get to some of the comments in a second. I think that Geno Stone, that's what I'm battling right now. The past 2 games, he's looked good. I think the tackling still shown at multiple points, missed a couple tackles, but he's laid the boom a couple times. I think that he has performed the past 2 weeks like we expected him to. This was the expectation when it came to Geno Stone. The interception today was beautiful. That is literally what we expected. And that's my concern, though, when it comes to a guy like Geno Stone. He's done that against, Will Levis. And I think that he deserves his flowers for the past 2 games, and we just got to hope that he continues to perform at this level. He is not a guy who's going to be great in the run game, and that's never been his MO, but he has to provide something when it comes to the passing game. So I thought that Geno Stone played good. It just still doesn't change what I've seen out of him for 13, 12 weeks of the season. So you just hope that he continues to perform like this, because he's on a 2-year deal. So maybe there's a world where he performs like this and you keep him on the roster. Hopefully, maybe not as the starting safety, but a guy who's getting, 20, 30% of the snaps. But he's looked good. And I think that he's one of the guys, when you look at that safety duo, obviously Von Bell's not the starter anymore. We saw the reason why at the end of the game where he let up a touchdown. And Jordan Battle, for me, it sucks because he's making such splash plays in certain moments, but then he's missing assignments. He just looks kind of like a guy who's just young right now, a guy who's not, fully grown into his role as a safety. And albeit safety is a tough position, but right now when I look at it, I think that Geno Stone has played like the best safety over the past 2 weeks, but Jordan Battle has been just too inconsistent for me. So he's a guy that I'm really circling, saying, hey, you've got a chance to win a starting job next year. You do, right? Nobody's been brought in yet. There's a huge safety class when it comes to free agency. So if I'm Jordan Battle, I really think that this is his chance to prove it to Lou Anarumo and say, hey, this is his chance to be a starting safety in the NFL. But I think that this may be his last real shot of saying, hey, he's going to be getting 80, 90%, almost 100% of the snaps over these next 3 weeks. So Jordan Battle definitely has to show me. Another one, Chase Brown has just been absurd, Malik. Chase Brown has been very, very, very good. He's looked like a top 10 running back, in the entire NFL. The dude is just performing at all levels. He called, got a passing interference call that was huge for the Bengals early on in the game. This dude is just doing it at all levels when it comes to receiving game. He is a consistent threat at multiple points, and him and Joe Burrow just having that connection where, hey, when the play breaks down, Chase Brown, his intelligence and football IQ to get back and come back to the football, that's something the Bengals have needed when it comes to running back. So I thought that Chase Brown has really been a huge bright spot. And this dude, whether you bring in somebody else as the thunder to his lightning next year, I think that would be a very smart thing, because I don't think that it is smart the next couple of years to have Chase Brown getting 20, 25 carries a game. I just don't think that's smart for his long-term, longevity.
Yeah, I mean, but if he also shows that he can handle it, why not? I mean, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
He's a smaller guy. You want to make sure can be more, can be durable for the remainder of the season, because you're going to need him for the long haul as the years stack up here. But again, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. Let's get to some of these comments, some of these questions before we head out of here, Daniel.
For sure. So we got one question was from a little bit a while ago saying, how confident are you guys that the Bengals will beat the Browns, Steelers, and the Broncos to win out?
I mean, the results this season have been a mixed bag of tricks. You can't be confident one way or the other. And I'm not trying to give a political answer here. I just think that you got to really just take it one game at a time, right? You really do. You can't get too big for your bridges. You got the Browns up next on tap. The Bengals are able to go into their house and beat them. So they're going to be looking to get that one back. But I also believe the Bengals can beat them. We got to see. I heard Myles Garrett got injured, and he was out for the game for an eye injury. I don't know if he came back into the game or not. There was a lot of mixed back and forth on Twitter. So I got to check on that to see if Myles Garrett was able to come back into the game and what his long-term status is. But you got to feel good that the Bengals can win this game. They look like a team that's sort of putting it all together, especially considering I think they didn't they lose one of their corners. I think Greg Newsome.
Yep.
For the next couple of weeks, so he won't be playing in this game. So the Bengals will be able to do some good stuff. And Coots Magoo said Myles came back into the game, so that was a false report that I saw. But yeah, I think the Bengals should be able to win this game. But again, beating the Browns have been something that has been difficult for them for the most of Joe Burrow's career. It was big to get that victory early in the season, but don't think that the Browns are just going to roll over. That's a good football team over there. I know Nick Chubb apparently broke his foot, so he obviously won't be playing in that game as well. So Browns are definitely down some pieces, just like the Bengals are. So Danny, what are your thoughts for that game?
Yeah, I think that, and this is where, if we want to have the Zach Taylor conversation, because I saw a lot of people were saying, covering for Zach Taylor. This is what's going to prove it to me. These past 2 weeks were nice, right? You got 2 wins, very good. It's the divisional games. It's the close one-score games. So for me, I think that this next stretch, I don't know if he has to go 3-0, right? I think that if the Bengals beat the Browns and beat the Steelers, I think that there's a real chance where Zach Taylor's back. But this is, for me, that's what the question is, right? The divisional games, how do you perform? And he has continuously been a below 500, coach when it comes to these divisional games. So I would hope that that Browns game is a win. The one I'm really circling is that Pittsburgh Steelers game, because I think, and this is what I said on the earlier shows, and we talked about this, I think that this season is going to come down to week 18 for all three playoff teams, the Colts, the Broncos, and the Cincinnati Bengals. Because I believe the Bengals will beat the Browns. I think that they will beat the Broncos, and it'll come down to the Bengals either beating the Steelers and the Broncos losing to a Chiefs team that potentially could be resting the starters. So I'd be circling those games, because the Pittsburgh Steelers game, I'm very confident the Steelers will still be having to play for something. They'll still have to play for that 2 seed, because them and the Buffalo Bills have the same record right now. And I think that both teams are going to, like I said, you got to go into Pittsburgh to win that game. So I think that that's the one I'm really circling when it comes to Zach Taylor and the Bengals.
I think it's crazy that they still have a shot, but I do want to just take it one game at a time here.
Yeah.
But Daniel, let's get to some more questions.
For sure. So we have some question about the defensive line. What was your guys' overall thoughts on McKinley Jackson, Sam Hubbard, and the Bengals defensive line today?
Man, I think that they played good as a collective unit. I think they did some nice stuff. I think they just got to be a little bit more consistent. What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, I think that when I look at how they played, McKinley Jackson, to me, he's made some splash plays, but still hasn't stood out a whole lot to me. I think that when I look at this defense, Chris Jenkins is really the guy that you want to build around, and he hasn't been that star yet. He's made some plays. He's made some good plays in the running game. So for me, if I'm looking at the Bengals defensive line, how I want to fix it, I really think that Chris Jenkins, you have to put time into him, and you've got to give him that shot. So I think that Chris Jenkins has been fine. He's been good in the run game. I really think that they're just really lacking a dominant pass rusher when it comes to the interior defensive line. And you got to get somebody opposite of Trey Hendrickson. So I thought they played good. Also, Joseph Asai, I really like him on the interior. He had a couple snaps today on the interior as well. I think that that could be a new role for him if the Bengals do want, end up re-signing him this offseason. But he was the only guy that really stood out to me outside of, like I said, Trey Hendrickson, always been a beast. But Joseph Asai on the interior, I thought was good. Cedric Johnson had a couple snaps, looked fine, looked whatever. Same thing with Miles Murphy, had a couple snaps at the end of the game. Looked fine, didn't look like anything crazy. So you got to keep giving those guys snaps. But I'd be looking at interior defensive line and edge opposite of Trey Hendrickson when it comes to first round of the NFL draft, because those are two spots that you got guys on the roster. Like I said, McKinley Jackson could develop into a nice pass rusher. They're fine, though. I think that this defensive line really needs a dominant 3-tech and a dominant guy opposite of Trey Hendrickson. Yeah. But when we have another question talking about, the Bengals, what's your guys' expectations for the coaching staff for the rest of the season?
I think everything's on the table. I think these guys have an opportunity to save their jobs. But I also think they have an opportunity to lose their jobs. It's all about how you approach these next couple of weeks. My expectation is I think they're going to get full-fledged effort. Lou hasn't got his guys disengaged yet. Zach hasn't had his guys disengaged yet. Offense still putting up points. Just need more consistency there. Defense is still trying their heart out, if you will. I think we got to be a little slow to judge some of the decision making from some of these coaches. Maybe there's a reason why Miles Murphy wasn't seeing as much playing time on the football field. Maybe the performance hasn't been ideal. But I still think everything's in front of them. Not in terms of them controlling their own destiny, but maybe saving their jobs. That's just my thoughts.
For sure. Yeah, and Gary Jellison said need speed in the linebacking group. I agree. And this is something, if we're going to be critical about this team, Jermaine Pratt, he makes splash plays, but there's been, even in this game, you can count on maybe even 2 hands the amount of missed tackles that he had. And it's just a clear lack of athleticism and not just basic athleticism, but we're talking an elite athlete, right? Tajay Spears, some of these dudes out of the backfield are elite athletes. And Jermaine Pratt in this Bengals linebacking room just doesn't have that right now. So I think when we're discussing where you can add it to, I'd be looking at somebody like that. Like I said, Jermaine Pratt is good in his role, but when it's a serious sore spot when it comes to the Bengals defense is the lack of, pure athleticism. But
we're going to get to about 2 or 3 more questions before we head out of here. Somebody asked Malik, what are you doing in Florida? just taking a little quick trip down here because the only time that we really got will be full steam ahead for the rest of the season. And then we've got the Super Bowl. Then we've got the Combine. It's just going to be a busy next couple of months, a lot of travel. So we're just trying to take a little spot to reset where we can. But I appreciate you asking.
So we got a question from Travis Swaller. He said, if the free agency started tomorrow and you could only sign one of the following, who would it be? Milton Williams or Azeez Ojulari? For me, I think it's too early to say who, because a lot of your decision making is also going to be looked at the draft. This draft is a huge spot for edge rusher when it comes to round one.
You think so? I don't.
I
don't think that what you do in the draft it should impact your free agency at all. Actually,
Really?
I think you have the opportunity to get. And remember, the draft is for the future. Free agency is for now. If you're trying to upgrade the defense, this is what got you in this position. You're relying on guys, young players, right away to come in and step up and play critical minutes. I think that it's in your best interest to attack the free agency. So that way the draft does open for you, because what you would do in free agency allows you to draft best player available, which is what the best teams around the league do. If you ask me, I would pick up at least Azeez Ojulari personally.
Really?
Yeah.
True. All right. Yeah, I think that it really depends for me. Like I said, those two guys, I'd probably go Milton, just because for me, like I said, if I go Azeez, and it depends on how long you sign him, I think Azeez could be your future opposite edge rusher of Trey Hendrickson. Or hell, if there's conversation you don't want Trey Hendrickson on your team, don't want to re-sign him, then maybe you do go that route, right? You do go get Azeez Ojulari, then you do go get a James Pierce in round one. So I think that they're gonna have their pick of defensive lineman for sure in round one and round two, as well as in free agency. One last question. We had some people were asking about who would be the best possible head coach outside of Zach Taylor if they were to move on from a Zach Taylor.
I have no idea. It's all about you, what you'd want. I like a guy in Brian Flores personally. I don't like unproven head coaches or guys that have a lot of demands. To me, that's a little bit of a red flag. But again, I just want to see how this season kind of shakes out the rest of the way. Effort is something I'm looking to. Consistency is something I'm looking into. But we got to have it all across the board, man. We can get to a few more, Daniel. Let's just make these a little quicker.
No, for sure. So we got a question from Tom Jones. Well, Tom Jones was just asking, Malik, you're right. Future is for the draft and free agency is for the now. Well, overall, Malik, what were your best takeaways from the game today?
I think the defense took a nice step forward. I mean, it was nice to see that a lot of these guys, when they have confidence, they could really take the next step. I think it was important for this young safety tandem now that we're seeing out there with Geno Stone and Jordan Battle. I think it was huge for the cornerback room, especially for Cam Taylor-Britt's confidence. He was a guy that was ripped deservedly throughout this entire season because of his poor play. I thought Joseph Asai showed some nice stuff. Thought BJ Hill showed some nice things. A linebacker unit definitely needs new juice in the offseason, but we'll tackle that when it comes. Nice touchdown catch by Sam Hubbard, I guess. I'm still not sold, though, Daniel, fully on just like not changing things personally. That's just my thought process.
Yeah.
And, I see a lot of people out there, they're saying, oh, well, 6 turnovers can make your defense look better than it is. Yes, but we can't ignore that the defense got the turnovers. You can only play what's in front of you. All right. Would y'all have wanted them to go out there and not put up a good performance? You have to celebrate the small victories because it allows you something to build on. What I told y'all a couple weeks ago is the same thing that holds true now. What you're looking for on the defense side of things is there building blocks for the future? Are there guys that you could rely on for the future? Whether you move on from Lou, whether you move on from Zach, whether you clean the entire coaching staff, you're trying to find building blocks for the future. Let's not complain about every little thing. Let's just see what the Bengals have moving forward. I wouldn't mind seeing a guy like Shaka Hayward personally and seeing what he could bring to the linebacker room because they definitely need speed. They definitely need athleticism, and they definitely need an infusion of youth.
For sure. So we had a question here from Shino Bamonti. He said, keep a few players and your draft picks on defense. if you build the defense better, there is no reason to lose with 30 plus points. Do you agree with the sentiment that adding overall talent on the defense will fix this Bengals team?
Yes. I don't think Lou, it just becomes some terrible defensive coordinator. I think that he's still keeping his complicated defense in for talent that is less than ideal. That's what I think is happening right now. And I think you have a lot of young players that are probably thinking too much out there personally. And it's your job as the defensive coordinator, as a staff, to adjust based upon the talent that you have. And I think that's something that if we are nitpicking or if we are looking at things, I think that this coaching staff had to do a better job of this year.
For sure. Question from Tom Jones. He said, Malik, do you think that we signed T and Chase after the season without harming paying a veteran defensive lineman or Trey Hendrickson?
Yes, because I also think contracts coming off the books. I do think that if you want to get both of these guys in the building, you can. And with them now having the same agent, it's even more favorable to happen. But I still think that you have to operate with the thought process that we need to fix our defense at all costs. Definitely need some talent in there, and it needs to start in free agency. And it doesn't need to stop when you get in the draft. You need to keep going and keep building, because that's how you're going to keep this thing, afloat.
Question from Dave's not here from earlier on the show was asking about Sheldon Rankins. Is there any update on the illness of a Sheldon Rankins?
The illness is serious. He is actually battling to get back. And, at the end of the day, it's like what I tweeted out earlier this week. It's not about football. It's about him getting back better, and I understand we are looking at the bottom line. I want to see him out there playing football games. And, sometimes business doesn't take precedent over, personal matters, respectfully. And I think it's important that we all respect his privacy.
We got a couple questions. Somebody was saying, first off, somebody said that Lou Anarumo's job is saved from Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. I don't think that that's what we're saying. We're not saying that just because he performed well against these guys. You have to take it 1 week at a time, and you have to take away the positives when it comes out of this. Like, this team, it is clear they are lacking at certain talent spots, and we're not saying that it is over now. We're sharing the same sentiment. A change should be made, but you have to see how they perform the rest of the season. And from what they've looked out of these past 2 weeks, there's a strong possibility where they continue to look good, especially against a Browns offense. And then you got the Broncos. So we got to see how they perform, but nobody is saying that Will Levis and Mason Rudolph saved Lou Anarumo's job. We're not saying that.
And again, we this is like such a fire culture, and even I'm guilty of it at times. But ideally, what defensive coordinator are you hiring that's going to be able to work wonders with this exact unit that we have right here? Mm-hmm. Respectfully, could they have made better coaching personnel decisions that maybe would have given them a couple more wins? Sure, 100%. And that's something that they have to wear as a coaching staff. But firing Lou, a guy that has proven to carry this team at points, I just don't believe that that's the right way to go about things personally.
And just even adding on to that, I think that when people are talking about this Lou Anarumo discussion, same thing with Zach Taylor, nobody is having the conversation about Zach Taylor, right? After this game, nobody's talking about the offense's poor performance, right?
Let me stop. Let me jump in real quick. I see JLog14 says there's an obvious extreme bias toward Lou. My guess is Malik has a relationship there. Let's address things. So on this show, I talk about everything. I have no relationship with Lou Anarumo at all. I'm just a guy that loves football, that talks to people around the league, and I just don't have immediate knee-jerk reactions to every little thing that's gone on. I look at the situation as a whole, and I literally said midway through the season, scapegoating is happening in process. When the staff first came here, and I said, he is a good defensive coordinator, he needs to get his own guys in here, when everybody under the sun was saying fire him. And that was after Duke and staff signed Preston Brown. That was after Duke and staff was persistent on believing that William Jackson was a cornerback one of the future and Carl Lawson was going to be an elite pass rusher for us. He said, no, those guys aren't going to be the guys for the future. They were a part of the bad defenses. He asked for his own guys in here. His own guys came in here. And guess what? They turned the defense around. They weren't an elite unit ever, but they created timely turnovers. They got the offense the ball back, and they were playing great. That's the point that we're missing here. They lose key players, and every move that the front office has made since then has been reactionary. Losing DJ Reader, bringing in Sheldon Rankins, giving Sheldon Rankins a contract that no other team in the league would have given Sheldon Rankins was reactionary. Moving on from Jesse Bates, not making a real attempt to keep him because his agent wasn't willing to play hardball. Guess what? Was a mistake. So again, when you can remove yourself and your emotions from that, and you can look at the situation as a whole, not just that the defense is playing poorly. For me, I'm a person, I run a business. I have close to 50 employees. I look at the situation, and when things go haywire and things mess up, I don't complain about the situation. I look at the situation as a whole. What led us to this point? And then we try to figure out how to move forward. Guess what? If teams around the league thought Lou Anarumo was a shit defensive coordinator, he wouldn't have garnered as much interest as he did for head coaching candidacy. He wouldn't have. And you know what the narratives around the league, what people think? They lack talent. They lack talent. That's what the narrative is. Let's stop with this BS narrative that elite players on the defense didn't just walk out the door and they did nothing to replace them. Let's not act as if Trey Hendrickson has a functioning tag team partner on the opposite side of him when he's the only true pass rusher on this team. There's only so much money to go around and so much allocated resources to go to specific units. When are we going to look at Duke Tobin and staff at this as a whole and look at them and say that they have missed on some picks, a lot of picks that has led them to this point? When are we going to do that? Firing coaches over and over and over again is not always the answer. Marvin Lewis said, you can fire coaches as much as you want, but at some point, the players have to play. So when I speak on Lou, when I speak on Zach, when I speak on Pitcher, when I speak on whoever, please, like, if you guys know me, if you guys been watching my content for a while, don't look at my content and think that there's biases, relationships involved. I had an interview lined up with Cam Taylor-Britt literally right after I did the Jermaine Burton and Dejon Anthony interview. Daniel was my witness, and I ripped him. I don't care about relationships. I don't care about who I know, who I don't know. It's not about that. I want the team to do what's best for them, and I don't believe firing a defensive coordinator that has saved Zach Taylor's ass on more times than not with lesser talent, with makeshift defensive line is the answer. He lost cornerback one. What did they do to help him? He lost one of his very good rotational pieces in Cam Sample. What did they do to help him? Right. So it brings me to that point that this dude has literally worked wonders with what they've given him at points since he's been the defensive coordinator, whether that be an Eli Apple ad, right? We've seen it. So let's not act like he's dealing with some elite players on the defensive side of the ball outside of one building block and Trey Hendrickson on this team who's still performing the way he's performing. That's just my thought process.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think you're right when it comes to this whole thing. And it's a conversation that we're pinpointing one specific guy in Lou Anarumo. Obviously, it's his unit, the defensive side. But for me, the struggle is when there is no conversation when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. And that's been in many games. You look at, like I said, the Chiefs game, the Ravens game. There's been so many games where the Bengals offense has made mistakes. There's been so many games. You look at the Cowboys game last week to where you can point and say, if the Bengals would have lost that game, the Bengals offense was the reason why they could have lost that game. You know, 3rd and 2, you're running a wheel route to T. Higgins deep down the field, incomplete. You go get a field goal. But that's the difference that we're trying to talk about on the show is the narrative is it's all on the Bengals defense. And what we're trying to discuss is football is played in 3 phases: offense, defense, and special teams. And it is very clear the Bengals fan base and what the national media is discussing is one aspect of that, and that's the defense. For us, we're going to discuss all 3 aspects. If we want to discuss all 3 aspects of today, the Bengals offense didn't perform up to par. They had 3 turnovers and 3 very massive turnovers. You can say, well, the Bengals defense forced 7. The Bengals offense still gave away the ball 3 times. So if we want to discuss, oh, well, that was against a great, or a bad Bengals or Titans offense, so the Bengals defense should have looked great. Well, how does this Bengals game go if they played a great Steelers defense? So that's the part of the conversation. We're not just pinpointing, shying away from the defense. We're discussing, but we also have to discuss the offense. Today, the offense, many times, and one of the reasons why I think Joe Burrow was frustrated on the sideline is because the offense had, 14 penalties. They were the most penalized, team over the past 3 weeks. And a lot of that goes to the offense. So, albeit you're playing without your two offensive tackles, Orlando Brown, Cody Ford were out, the offense still had serious problems today. And that's something that we're also not talking about. So we had a question asking about the opposite side of Trey Hendrickson and Malik. Do you think that Myles Murphy is the guy, or should they go out and get an edge opposite for Trey Hendrickson?
Let me tell you the same thing that I had when I had a conversation in the offseason. If Jared Verse is staring at you in the face, you draft Jared Verse. I was told that they feel as if they have an abundance of guys on the defensive line, especially when it comes to defensive end. And who do you make room for, right? Who do you cut to make room for said draft pick? To me, not a good enough reasoning. So that's why I knew Jared Verse wasn't realistic. You asked me, Myles Murphy is not stopping me from drafting Jared Verse. And the Bengals are probably going to be in a favorable position again this draft, where they're going to be able to draft an edge of the future. You run to the podium because the results that you have seen from said draft picks have been less than ideal. I do not care about Joseph Asai's potential. I do not care about Myles Murphy's potential. I do not care that Sam Hubbard is a Cincinnati kid and we all love him. I don't care about that. I care about the Bengals putting the best foot forward to fix this defensive line. That's what I care about. And the front office needs to do a better job of getting their head out of their ass and draft best player available, because Jared Verse at that point, maybe Amarius Mims was, but I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, he was the best player to draft at that point. So to me, it was abysmal on a lot of fronts, especially when you knew you were losing a DJ Reader and you knew you had question marks amongst your defensive line and you did nothing to help a guy like Trey Hendrickson amidst a contract dispute. So for me, it's malpractice what this front office has done, which is why I speak so passionately about it. 100%, you do what you need to do to fix the defensive line. There's not one person on the Bengals defensive line that's stopping me from upgrading the group this year in free agency or the draft, respectfully. There's nobody that's stopping me from getting better, because guess what? Outside of Trey Hendrickson, who you got?
Mr. Whisper had a question about Geno Stone. Does Geno Stone's performance over the past 2 weeks save his job for the next season?
Probably, more than likely. He showed a lot of promise. He's getting more confident, more situated in this defense. I just think that, somebody also asked, do I think a defensive lineman opposite of Trey Hendrickson would save this defensive line unit? 100%. Trey Hendrickson is getting chipped and double teamed. It's horrendous out there. He needs help. It's very clear he needs help, right? And to me, I just think that the way they're going about it is just very asinine in a lot of ways. Like, upgrade the defensive line. You made no additions after 2020 and 2021 in free agency. You made no impact free agency additions. Matter of fact, I think they only had added like Sidney Jones. I did a whole breakdown talking about it. They added like Sidney Jones and like something else, but there was no impact. There was no players added to the defensive unit for 2 seasons. That actually played significant snaps or even saw serious playing time outside of Nick Scott, Sidney Jones. There was no impact players. After they lost Jesse Bates, everything after was reactionary. When they lost DJ Reader, it was reactionary. To think Sheldon Rankins was going to replace DJ Reader was stupid. All because the guy had a 3-sack performance against Joe Burrow. That's what the front office goes with? Like, come on now. Get a real GM in here. Get a guy in here that actually knows how to evaluate talent and go from there. But for so long, Duke Tobin in this front office has gone under the radar, right? It's ridiculous. This is my thought process. Listen, that's all the time that we got. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode of the Sit Down with Malik Wright and our Bengals recap show. We hope that you guys give this video a like. We hope that you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from TWSN Studios or from Florida. We appreciate y'all so much. We hope that you guys enjoyed the Bengals victory. And until next time, Hoo day.
All they ever do is win, so